Hey, welcome to the Hell Has an Exit podcast. I'm your host, Bryan Alzate. This show is not affiliated with any specific 12-step program. If you or a loved one is struggling with an addiction, please find a local 12-step meeting. If you believe you may need detox or drug treatment of any kind, please call 888-699-9395 to speak to a specialist. The show is sponsored by United Recovery Project, a state-of-the-art drug and alcohol rehab facility. You can visit our website at unitedrecoveryproject.com. All right, welcome to Hell Has an Exit. I'm your host, Bryan Alzate, and on this show, we interview individuals who have survived addiction and other sorts of adversities and have lived to tell about it, people that have an ability to inspire people with hope. And tonight, I got my buddy Adam C. in the building.
What's up, Bryan?
What's going on, man? So you're just telling me you got 6.5 years clean. That's awesome.
Yes, sir.
Also a Florida native.
Correct. Yeah.
305?
Yeah.
Miami?
I was born in New York originally. I just don't tell anybody that. And then I came down here when I was like 3 or 4 years old and grew up in Miami or in Miami Beach.
Puerto Rican?
Half
Puerto Rican, half Irish?
Correct.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. So you're one of my favorite speakers, bro. I love hearing you speak. You got a great recovery, man. You got an amazing reputation that follows you. Yeah, let's hear it, man.
Yeah, no, I'll never get used to hearing anything like that, you know. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Yeah, you know, like we came here to Florida. You know, my mom came down here with my grandmother, and like my grandmother was like my mom, you know, and that's how, and basically, you know, did their best to raise me. You know, my mom had me pretty young and, you know, came down to Florida. It's the 80s, you know, and things just went that way. And, you know, there came a point where we came down to Florida, and I was like, the first time I was like truly happy. I remember experiencing like true joy, you know, as a child. As time went by, my grandmother got really, really sick, you know. She had various types of cancer, and this is like the most important person in my life, you know what I mean? And so what ended up happening was she, you know, in getting sick, like I like shared a room with her at one point, and like basically slept next to her as she like deteriorated, you know? And this is like really early on. I'm like 6, 7, you know? And like she did like a lot of this came from like smoking and whatnot. So I do things like hide the carton of cigarettes and, you know, all that stuff. Like, you know, things were different back then. She like was smoking like 3 packs of Marlboro Reds a day, like drank a beer, you know what I mean? Like, so this is like what I grew up around, you know. My mom like worked in the hospitality industry, you know, before it was called the hospitality industry. You know, it was like a fucking bar, you know what I mean? Like bar restaurant situation on Biscayne Boulevard. And it like from a young age, like ingrained that that's part of who you are, right? Like my mom made her living off of people getting drunk, right? And also eating and whatnot. Let me make it, you know, dramatize it, you know? And my grandma, like, you know, the things that like, that she appreciated most, you know, were like, you know, cigarettes and like, you know, beer here and there, right? And yeah, dude, and it just got, when I look back, it's probably like the most, one of the most painful, like first painful experiences, you know? And so, yeah. And so she was like she was obviously older. She had my mom late. My mom had me early, right? And so she actually made sure that I went to school. Like she put me in like this Catholic school, right? It's over in Miami Beach called St. Joseph's.
Everyone who goes to Catholic school just fucks their life up, huh?
Well, no, actually, like they kicked me out like off top. I went through kindergarten, and then first grade, yeah, they were like, yeah, no. They said he's got to go.
In first grade?
First grade, yeah, they kicked me out of first grade.
What were you doing?
Well, their excuse was handwriting. They said
wow.
Yeah, but it wasn't handwriting. Like I was just like an unruly kid, you know, like the toxic relationships that I'm talking about pertain to family in particular. Like my father, he was a Vietnam veteran, came back from war and wasn't the same person, you know, and when he used the way that he used, you know, he'd come back and be, you know, extremely violent with my mom, you know, and so and seeing the things that I saw, you know, at a very extremely young age, you know, I think it just kind of transformed me into a different person, like desensitized me to a lot of things. Like, so thrill seeking became pretty easy. You know, it wasn't easy to manage. So handwriting was a nice excuse to ask me to get the fuck out of Catholic school.
Mm-hmm.
So she made sure, you know, and the other part of that was that she made sure that like we'd go to like church on Sundays, and that like I had like my communion. Is that what it is? Like my first communion. And she was like the person who brought God into the house, right? Like, or just the idea of a God, right? And so when she died, you know, God died with her. And that's where like my life like really changed. It's like a huge transition for me. I know it sounds kind of dramatic, but for me as a kid, it was like a really big deal, you know? And yeah, and that just kind of like took me into like a different space, you know? At that point, like my view on things just kind of changed, right? Like the way that I react to things, you know, I had a lot more independence now, right? Because now my mom's like scrambling to make sure that we don't want for anything, right? So she's working nights, sometimes days and nights. And so what happens, you know, so just running around Miami, you know what I mean? You know, that's what started things, you know? It wasn't until like late middle school that substances got involved, you know what I mean? But yeah, it's, you know, that's leading up to the whole active addiction piece, right? You know, it's, you know, Miami in the 90s is pretty wild, right? I remember.
What part of Miami?
I grew up in Miami Beach. There's a small town. It's not necessarily a town. It's like if you go down 79th Street Causeway, between the beach and the city, there's this little island called North Bay Village, and that's where I grew up. It's where I went to. It's where I went to elementary school and everything else. And you know, I went to like a magnet middle school. Like if you're good at something, like whether it be math or language or writing or art or whatever that looks like they'll find a school that is predominantly one particular like socioeconomic racial background, and then bust all the kids in there under the guise of a program, you know? And yeah, so I went to school in the city, you know, and it was just, you know, I just remember, it was like a lot of time was like spent alone, you know? My mom had a son. It was a lot of time with just him and I early on. So isolation was like no stranger, you know what I mean? I knew how to operate, you know, in keeping secrets. You know, it was very easy to keep secrets when you're the only one that knows, you know. It's really easy to keep secrets when there's no one to share them with. What ended up happening was as time went by, I just found myself just never quite fitting in, right? There was always just this divide. You know, there's these different groups of kids, and they were just like so devout in believing this one specific thing that they believed in, whether it was like, you know, like these like gothic metal kids or like, you know, like hip hop kids, like whatever, or what they called it, bass back then. And it was like, whatever it looked like they were like, just like, this is what I am. And I like both, you know what I mean? And I like different shit too, you know? And so it wasn't like, it was really hard for me to like pick like a specific line or find myself identifying with a specific group of people, you know? And as time went by, I eventually I got to this this school. It was another magnet school, but it was for art and design. And going to the school for art and design in Miami, it's got design and architecture senior high school. It's still there. It's a really nice place. Somewhere around there, like the summer before like high school started, like, you know, I was already drinking and whatnot, but at that point, like I remember like getting high for the first time, like smoking weed for the first time. And I just remembered like now, like whoever is in this room, like these are the people that I belong with. You know, it didn't, and to be honest with you, I don't even remember who was in the fucking room, but I just knew that those people were all right because they were vulnerable. I'm vulnerable too. And in this moment, like we're going to just sit here. Everything's okay. And now we have a secret that we share with one another because we can't tell anybody.
Yeah. Once you like to do something illegal with like a group of people, it doesn't matter if they were like preppy or like nerdy or gothic or, you know, some hood kid or whatever. Like when you guys had that secret, that bond that you shared, it was like this illusion of connection. And maybe like looking back in the beginning, there was a lot of connection. You know, it's almost like, you know, like you break bread with someone, but like, I don't know, like even like you got away with it and you got to like, you know, put Visine in your eyes and like that whole thing. And
oh yeah, I had the kit. I had like this little, like, you know, those like little like Guatemalan zip up wallets that you have, like those like little woven things.
I'm not Guatemalan.
Well,
I know, just messing.
but yeah, I had like cologne, the Visine, like this like metal, this crude metal pipe that I had in there, some tinfoil for I don't know what the fuck. I just knew that drug addicts carried tinfoil, and I knew that now I am a drug addict, right? Like this is like an identity that I wanted to adopt, you know, whether it be like music, like the music like that talked about drugs, it sucked. It wasn't really great music, but I'd listen to it just because it talked about drugs, right? And like bump it, you know, like this is me, you know, this is who I am. And, you know, and like it gave me something to like cling to, you know, and I just kind of took on the persona, you know, or I no longer was Adam, you know, I was Adam, the drug addict, you know what I mean? Because it wasn't like this, like, you know, romance period, like where it was like, oh, I smoked weed for several years and, you know, decided whether or not, like, no, like I smoked weed. I said, what the fuck else you been lying to me about? Because I grew up in like the 80s and like the early 90s where like they had like eggs frying in pans and people jumping into like empty swimming pools, right? And like I smoked and that shit was nothing like that. You know, my brain wasn't sizzling. I didn't want to kill myself. And so all I thought is, how far can I push this? You know? And so right after that, you know, psychedelics, you know, different party drugs. And now I knew I wanted to be out. You know, everything started like, I remember like skipping school for the first time. Like that happened long before I started getting high, but just, you know, it's funny, like you're indoctrinated with this belief when you go to school every day and you go through the same processes and the bell rings and you know that it's time to go and get up and you know that you have to be at the next place before the next bell. Like you have this like this belief system that this is where you have to be. And when you finally break free, like you have this like tremendous illusion of freedom and emancipation.
Not just that, there's like this imaginary consequence, like, well, if you don't go to class on time, you're gonna like have this huge consequence. Then like the consequence starts happening and you feel like you're not gonna survive it or it's gonna like ruin your world. And then you realize it's not a big deal at all. You know what I mean? Like you start to feel invincible.
100%, you know?
And that's like that childhood wonder where like, you know, I know for me, it was just like when I started smoking and skipping school and hopping fences and getting into cars and hanging out with like the older crowd. It was just like dazed and confused, like every movie I've ever seen. And then you have like the other kids that are just like following in line. You're just like,
yeah, that shit's dead, you know? And like,
I was going to say the irony is that I would make fun of all these people that would like be fitting into like, you know, the rules of school or whatever. I was dying to fit in, you know? I was dying to fit in so much that I was willing to fit in with the kids that were breaking all the molds. You know what I mean? I just wanted to be out of that fucking prison mentality of school and rules.
Yeah, 100%. Like, you know, it's funny because I tricked myself into believing that I had like figured out this secret that nobody else knew when in reality, all I wanted was to be a part of, you know, and I just never felt okay. And this is long before the use of drugs, you know, I'm not saying that like, you know, I was an addict long before I ever picked up, like, you know, doesn't matter if, you know, like the chicken or the egg argument, right? Like it's all scrambled now, right?
Yeah.
So like, what does it matter? But at the end of the day, like I remember having these feelings like super early on, you know, and like a lot of times, like seeing like other people's families, you know, I've been delving back into some like work, you know, some 12-step work with my sponsor. And one of the things that popped up recently was, you know, like these fleeting thoughts come, like these memories start rushing back, you know? And one of them was like going to that high school that I was just telling you about. It was parent teacher night, you know, and like all the parents are coming in to get briefed on what's going on, what projects are their kids working on, right? So all these parents came for their kids and they brought the kids that I go to school with every day. And these kids are my friends, you know? So I'm there, you know, by myself and going to like meet with the teachers by myself about me, you know, not because I had to, Like there was no penalty for me. My mom was working, it wasn't something like she had to like, something she did wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But I just like remember like leaving there and hopping on like the 3 bus on Biscayne to go home, and this tremendous empty feeling, and just truly feeling at that point like, yeah, like you're completely different. Like you are not in the realm of reality.
Everyone else had their parents there except for you.
Yeah, and I felt like I was like keeping up this appearance. And like I told you, I'm the only one that knew. So it's really easy to keep this secret. In reality, it's no secret at all.
Mm-hmm.
Like the truth made so much sense. But in this particular situation, it just came back up recently, and I remembered, like, it's funny because like I remember sitting on the bus, and I'm sitting like in my car, just feeling like I'm back on that bus. You know what I mean? It was like, all right, like, hey, let me move on, right? And they ended up kicking me out of that school for stealing a triple beam balance. They didn't like expel me, suspend me. Like they suspended me for a couple of days, but like they didn't invite me back the next year.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was like this really weird time. Like selling beeper chains that my friend stole from his beeper store. That was like the first hustle,
Mm-hmm.
and just like and wheeling and dealing, like, and it wasn't really early on. Like I started to realize like I enjoyed the hustle more than I enjoyed the actual high.
Yeah, I think in the beginning I fell in love with the lifestyle. Like the lifestyle of using and whatever, just being labeled as like one of the bad kids was like exciting. And so when did you cross that line of it being, the hustle and the lifestyle to getting and using and finding weed as a means to get more?
There's a few times. There isn't like this one defining moment or time that it changed, I hear people ask me all the time, like, like, what was your drug of choice? Right? It's like, dude, no, like a choice would mean that I have like some level of control.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have any control, What if it was there and it was available and I could find myself within a comfortable range in order to use it, I would. Fast forward, like I moved up to North Miami Beach, and I moved in with my girlfriend at her grandparents' house, in this high rise. And we went out one night, and the first time I did cocaine was in the ladies' room of a Chinese restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
And I was probably like 16 years old. So like, if you want to say like a defining moment, like that was probably it, because nothing really happened. I didn't really get high. All I knew is that like my left tooth was numb. My left front tooth was like, I couldn't feel it. And there wasn't really like a high associated with it, but I just knew that I wanted to do it again and again. So I did cocaine for like 2 days and found myself outside of a store asking random people for money.
Mm.
Like right away. I was like, yeah, that's like, I woke up the next day like, wow, like that happened fast. And I did cocaine for years, up until like 2010,
Mm-hmm.
like, I was a big drinker too. So, like cocaine was just like steroids for my alcohol, my alcoholism. That was like my entire adult life. So I did what I knew, and I got jobs at restaurants and stuff. Like in between all of this, like I fancied myself like some type of a drug dealer. And that couldn't have been like further from the truth. Like I sold drugs to people, sure I did. But like, it wasn't really like that. Like I have this like rap sheet, dude. Like I've been arrested 36 times, right? Every other time I do something bad,
Mm-hmm.
there's direct, horrible consequence, right? Here's a pretty interesting one. Like in 2005, I was homeless. I was living on my buddy's couch at this point. I was just hopping from house to house. I was really good at convincing people to let me stay where they were, at their spot. In staying there, like he was like a contractor, and did like construction work. I'm not handy at all, but like I'll be handy for a place to live,
Mm-hmm.
So I would like, use with him and like go work with him. And sometimes, some mornings I'm just not getting up because he gets up at like 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm not even asleep yet sometimes. And one day he comes in and he's like, listen, my buddy's up in Quebec and they have like a ton of these BC buds, they have like a bunch of them, and they want to give us some to start selling down here. Now, this was right after Hurricane Wilma.
What's interesting is that I remember like BC Bud, where that it was like if it was from Canada. I don't know why it was called BC Bud, but you can distinctively tell it smelled a little different. It was like,
Yeah, it was super dry, like super compressed. It was like this like Canadian like outdoor type of shit, or like and like let's face facts, like it wasn't that good.
Yeah.
And but it looked good, right? Because it wasn't
It was like the mids of Crippy.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But you could always spot it. You'd be like, oh, this is BC
Yeah,
Bud.
exactly. Because it was like almost cardboard in a sense, you know. But the thing was that after Hurricane Wilma, you know, BC Bud sounded pretty fucking good because nobody was growing anything indoors because there was no fucking power, and you know, it was really difficult for just it was as a whole, like the city, like that hurricane caught everybody off guard, you know, and so he comes up with this, and this to me, I'm like, this is amazing news, you know, like he's like, yeah, he's like, so I've been thinking. He's like, we'll go up there and we'll bring it back. And I'm like, yeah, we'll go up there and we'll bring it back. Right. And then that slowly morphed into like, you know, me being the one that goes up there to go get it. And because we didn't have a lot of money, I would take an Amtrak, right, there and back in order to get it. Now, at this point, like I didn't really have anything to lose. You know, I remember being like in a spot where it's like I just found this place of like, you know, where I convinced myself that like my family hated me, you know, because they were just so like immensely disappointed by the constant letdowns. You know, I constantly getting fired from every job because I can't like keep appearances and things of that sort. And all I'm doing is like wearing pajama pants, like hopping from couch to couch, you know. So I said, yeah, you know, and so I booked the Amtrak, and when I get there, you know, I meet these guys, and it was like in the middle of December or the beginning of December in 2005, and like, and so I said, you know, and I said, no, I really want to take this with me because like I wanted the money now. I wanted any type of profit or benefit from this whole situation now, you know.
How much bud was it?
It was like, it was, well, the cops said it was 30, right?
30 what? Pounds?
Yeah, it was 50. But like the way that it worked, dude, like I ended up talking them into like, yes, I'm doing this. So the guy was coming with me, like one of the guys that I met up there. Is, you know, I gassed up Florida like real heavy. You know, meanwhile we got no fucking power, and we take the train on the way back, and like, and I'm just looking out the window, like mission accomplished. You know. And
obviously not.
Yeah. Well, no, like, yo, like I figured if it was gonna happen,
it would have happened by the time we got on the train.
Yeah, you know. So I'm sitting there like this, like my hand on my fist, like gazing out the window, and all of a sudden I hear like these two like big dudes like come over, and they're like, they look at a seat that's next to me, which is supposed to be the seat that I'm sitting in. I'm still like just staring out the window, you know, and then eventually they asked me, and they're like, excuse me, are you Adam Castro? I'm like, oh, excuse me? And they're like, yes, what do you have in your bag? I'm like, what do I have in my bag? And they're like, yeah. So it turns out like I got like red flagged. I don't really know if that's the truth or if I actually got somebody called it in, but like
the ticket on the way back was a one way. What does that mean?
Well, like, you know, you could book like a one way or a round trip.
Yeah.
Obviously, I didn't need a round trip because I'm not coming back here.
Yeah.
You know, so they booked it one way, and supposedly that's what got me flagged. And they said, "Can we search your bag?" I said, "No, you know, you can't. You know, like I think we've reached impasse here, sir. Yeah. Like you can't search my bag." And eventually, they just ripped it out of my hands and opened it up.
Who were they? Cops?
No, they were the DEA. Yeah, they were working there at Union Station, and they were picking out suspicious people who were possibly transporting.
And they just happened to pick you out?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really...
You're probably wearing pajama pants.
Bro, yeah, I was wearing like these like real shady jeans and like and these like tacky dress shoes, trying to play this like imaginary part that I had made up of like this like wandering like bohemian dude from Florida. They brought me in, and I sat in Cook County Jail in Division 1, same building like Al Capone was in, and for like 7 months. Yeah. Wow. And awaiting trial, you know, and like it wasn't really the fact that like I was like so far from home or that I was in jail, because jail had become home and I had been like in and out so often. It was the fact that like I was facing 6 to 30 minimum mandatory for a class X felony,
Mm. With a
and
bunch of priors.
yeah, with a bunch of priors. I didn't have priors in Illinois, but when I went to court, they said, they wanted, it was $1 million bond, 100,000 cash, in order to get me out. So I had just resigned myself to the fact that in the best case scenario, I'd be doing 6 years in prison, in Illinois, going to Statesville or something like that. And
How old were you?
um, December of '05, I was 26. So, and then like I spent like the majority of my of that year like in jail in Chicago. Eventually, as time went by, like your family starts to notice that you're not around. When I got in there, I just slept for like 2 weeks. Like sleep. When I say sleep, I mean like I was sleeping like 20 hours a day.
Every time something bad happens to me and I don't want to like face life, I just get extremely tired. I'll sleep for weeks, days in the car. Like every time I've ever been arrested, I have to go to court, and like your brain can't imagine that this is really happening. You
Mhm.
just like go to sleep.
Well, like for me, what it was is that like there was so much uncertain for so long, and the chase was so tireless, whether it be like, getting higher, whether it just be finding a place to live, or whether it be, getting found out in some kind of scam, like whatever it was, like this was the first time that I had experienced what I imagined to be peace, because I thought that like this was the only certainty I had
Hmm.
had. Like I'm going to prison, And so, yeah, so I just kind of like tried to figure, like resign myself. This is like probably, my first experience with surrender, if I really think about it. Right.
Hmm.
And so I get a note passed to me from a guard saying, like 2 weeks in, and I like, call your mother. Apparently, like I was like on the news, and like and there's like news articles,
Hmm.
and a cop who they passed it on to, who wasn't even the DA agent. DA agents saw it and they're like, it's fucking weed. So they passed it on to like the local police.
Hmm.
Local police took like pictures, and
Like it was a big drug bust. Yeah.
yeah, like, yeah, look at this. Like, me too. Like I was a fucking mule, dude. Like I'm like coming down there with like, I literally had like probably $27 in my
Hmm.
pocket to like get back home, and like, so it wasn't like this big traumatic thing. And when they arrested me, they're like, dude, you're so polite. I'm like, they were like, trying to like weigh the drugs, like pound for pound. They had like a triple beam. And dude, like I told you,
Wow.
I'm familiar with triple beams, right? So you're like, I got kicked out of high school for this. So I'm like, no, you want to do this and this.
Hmm.
And so like, they're like, why are you being so polite? I'm like, I'm fucked. I'm fucked. Like, it is what it is. It's like, why am I going to make my situation any more difficult? And they were blown away by that. And, but yeah, so like back to my mom, so I ended up I called my mom and I'm like, how'd you find me? She's like, well, you were on like TV and stuff. I'm like, but you're in Florida. Like, yeah, it traveled. And apparently there's this article where like the arresting officer says, well, it's not a boatload, but it's nothing to sneeze at. And dude, like I sat there and like eventually, and I didn't say anything, and like I took this immense pride in not saying anything. And so, yeah, it was, and like that was like, I took all this pride in that, because that was like all that I could really say that I had left. Like I had this like imaginary integrity,
Hmm.
this false sense of security in
That would
this.
happen to me every time. Like I would rob my mom, but if I got arrested, I wasn't snitching. It's like,
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah, it's same. And so the one thing I didn't want to lose was being able to hold up my head in jail. Right? Like fuck my mom, fuck that. But when I go to jail, I need to be able to say some shit,
Hmm.
because I don't care who you are. When you go to jail, like your situation's always different, than what you're saying, because people only know so much. But as time went on and they started to realize the severity of it, and they realized that like I was coming from Florida, that there was direct intent and all of that, like, they're like, yeah, this is looking pretty bad. And so like my mom like came up with like all this money and like hired this attorney for me. And like we filed a motion to suppress the evidence because I said, you can't search my bag. And I won and I got
Nice.
yeah, and I won and I got out of that. And I mean, like this is like that, like some of this grace that I didn't know that I was being given, you know, because that wasn't where I was supposed to be. You would think, like, even with this like immense consequence and like this like huge like wedge in my life, you know, of this like near traumatic experience, you know, life altering experience, right? That would make some type of a change, and it didn't.
Hmm.
It was just worse, you know?
And I always try to explain that to people is that like consequences don't change addicts' behavior. You know, normal people, yeah, like if you're not an addict, a couple bad consequences in any type of scenario, they start to change their behavior to not have the consequence. You know, it's dog training 101. You know, they want the reward, they don't want the consequence. The addict like doesn't learn that way, you know. And I always say like this analogy that like, you know, if you have a pit bull that's grabbing onto something, like you're never going to rip it out of its mouth. You have to give it something else. And for an addict, like we don't learn, like you can hit us, you can punch us in the face. Like we're not letting go of that behavior until we have something different. And for me, the only thing different that's ever worked is complete abstinence, also with the 12 steps and working a real program.
No, 100%, you know, and that was, and, you know, that's, like, this was still a ways off, you know, like, this is like, it's like 2006,
Yeah.
you know,
When did you get clean? 2001?
2014, I got clean 5 days before my 35th birthday.
Wow.
Yeah. You know, it's weird because when you get clean, right? And like in this area in particular, here in South Florida, you know, the opioid epidemic made recovery a lot younger. Like it wasn't like, I remember driving by like a clubhouse that was on the street that I grew up on in Miami on 79th Street. And I remember driving by it and like thinking, like seeing these people sitting outside, like they would like be like, this is Florida heat. And they're out there like drinking coffee and smoking cigarettes on the sidewalk. Like this is like the 80s, you know, and they look haggard, you know what I mean? Like I remember thinking like, that's what,
you know, in my mind, recovery was like a step up from the methadone clinic, you know, even worse, you know, it's like you got people that are on methadone, then you have these people that are in recovery and they just like hang out together and drink stale coffee and sit around in a fucking circle in a fucking empty school gymnasium after hours and talk about their depressing ass lives, and they just don't use, but are still like miserable and fucking weird and Jesus freaks. And I'm like, I'd rather be on the methadone line.
when I got here, you know, I got into recovery, everybody was like 21 or 22 years old. I just,
especially in South Florida. I mean, South Florida is crazy.
in 2014, that was
Even when I got clean in 2008, and bro, there was mad young people with clean time. You'd go out to eat with people, and people be in their 20s, 4 years clean, 6 years clean, 3 years clean, you know.
Yeah, I mean, because down here, like we survived like this like huge wave of like pill mills. You know, there was a time where I was seeing 25 doctors a month.
So at 26, you're not on opiates yet.
No.
What happens in those 9 years?
Well, what happens is like in 2006, you started seeing like this wave of pill mills that started popping up, you know, people would like, I'd have Percocets and people would like ask me for them because I'd like get them in some kind of like package deal. I'm like, yeah, or a Laura tab.
Yeah.
Like, take this trash, dude. Like, no, like I wanted like Xanax
And Coke.
Yeah, Coke. And I wanted, roofies. I wanted like benzos. And like, and then I remember like, these pill mills started popping up and like people started handing me like this like submarine bright blue
Oxy
Oxycontin.
120.
Yeah, it was 160.
160.
Yeah. Those didn't last long. People died like immediately. Yeah. And like, they're like, yeah, that's not good for business, And I was working in the hospitality industry, right? Because that's all I knew. Because I could go in, I could work, and I get money, and I can use that money that night to go do what it is I want to do.
It's the only job that does that.
Yeah, 100%. Cash that night, It's like, it was the closest thing to selling drugs, for me, in my head. And so like people would start handing me like these like little blue pills and like they're like, oh, and you can snort them and and I'm like, really? Like it's so small. And I'm like, okay, well, how much is it? And they're like, it's like $10. I'm like, $10. I'm like, but like I want like 100, and they're like, well, it's gonna be $1,000, you know? And it's like, well, that's not gonna work. I don't have $1,000. I have 60, you know? So I like pick up the New Times. If you grew up in South Florida and you wanted to know some illicit, dirty shit to do, you go to the back of this free rag newspaper, right?
Yep. And they'd have massage parlors, and then they'd be like, bam, bam, pain clinic, pain clinic, cash only, no MRI on first visit. We have Oxy 80s.
Yeah.
I remember seeing like, you'd flip to the back of it, and it'd be like a picture of an Oxy 80 that would say, we have 80s, no MRI on first visit, cash only.
Yeah.
And
I'm from Miami, you know, and I had to come up to Broward to do all of that, you know, and that's how I ended up living here. You know, I had this this doctor, and he ended up getting arrested, and he was like taking like dead patients' prescriptions and using them and like all this stuff. And it got real crazy. You know, that whole time was nuts. Like it was a complete warped reality, you know? And I would take like the Tri-Rail up here to Atlantic and right off Atlantic in 95 and go to see my doctor. And I remember like I go to see this doctor and like I told you, you know, like I wanted like all of these pills, but I didn't want to pay what you wanted. And I wanted to figure out like, how do I get to the source, you know, like take me to like the activist warehouse, right? And so the closest I could get was this doctor's office. And the first visit, you know, keep in mind, I'm like 26 years old, right? 27 years old at this point. And they're like, oh yeah, you know, oh, you've had a broken arm and this and that. By the time I walked out, I had 240, like 30 milligram, you know, oxycodones.
Yeah.
I had 120 15s. I had 90 bars. Now, listen, 90 bars, that's for a month, right? 'Cause you're supposed to see a doctor every month. If you're taking 3 bars a day, you might as well as like live in your closet. like
Just about.
yeah, you're not getting shit done on 3 bars a day. Like you think you are. Like I thought I was really solving some problems, you know, and
that's just the bars.
yeah, that's just the bars, you know. And then like I started like learning the system, and I'd be like, I have no energy. Perfect. Here's Adderall. And then you know, and I was like, oh well, now my dick doesn't work. They're like, oh, here's Viagra. So by the time it's all said and done, I'm like, oh, man, my muscles are tense. Here's some Somas. So I go to these doctors and walk out with like at 27 years of age with like, you know, 9, 10 prescriptions. And
that an 80-year-old person on cancer wouldn't even be able to rationalize taking.
Not even close. And then, so, but the problem was that, you know, like I couldn't, like I told you, I had $60, right? But I can't like afford the visit. So I would ask people to like sponsor, right? It's my first experience with sponsorship. And so they would do that. And the problem
For people that don't know, that's when they pay for the visit or they pay for the script or vice versa, and you break them off at the end.
Correct. Yeah, you break it down like a price per pill, and then you at an extremely low rate, you know. And then at that point, you just keep whatever's left over. But the problem was whatever was left over was just not enough, you know. So the next day, I picked up the New Times again. You know, I'm like, there's another doctor up the street. You'll see him. And same thing happened. And then what ended up happening was like every day of the week, Monday through Friday, my full-time job was to go see a different doctor. But the problem was that with a specific doctor, unless they dispensed on site, you had to go to a pharmacy and you had to remember what pharmacy you're going to. Otherwise, you run the risk of getting arrested for doctor shopping. And a couple times, like they're like, "What the fuck? You were just here like 3 days ago with this other doctor's prescription," and I like snatch the prescription and run out the door. You know?
Yeah, but if you went to like a mom and pop place, they wouldn't even care.
Yeah, you were more plugged than I was, because I was like, I'm the guy who's snatching prescriptions and running out the door, and so like it got really confusing. And keep in mind, this is like the world's most delicate juggling act, because I'm also taking my Xanax as prescribed, you know? So taking my 3 Xanax a day to make sure that I can cope with all of this because of all this anxiety and stress. Because this is not an easy job, you know? And like, and the more Xanax I take, the more confused I get which pharmacy I'm supposed to go to. Eventually, like,
it's a tightrope.
Yeah, you know, and it's like, you know, it's, you know, fortune favors the bold, man, you know? And so, you know, I remember just 2009, there started being talks of them Governor Christ at the time was going to then implement the network.
The database.
The database, right? Whatever it was called. And I was like, like
everyone's freaking out. Yeah.
It was like this like bout of anxiety. And I remember going to like, I'm from Miami, right? And so I'm like, I'm going to go to fucking Overtown, right? And I'm going to start buying heroin for these people who can't fill their prescriptions. And I'm like, I don't know, Adam, but it's probably the smartest shit you ever came up with in your life. Bro, no one else is going to think of this,
So then you transition from pills to heroin?
Yeah. Yeah. And then.
Were you snorting it?
I mean, like very shortly, like I told, like my life is like in this vacuum where everything just moves fast, And so I started shooting almost immediately. And I just remember like the first day that like dude didn't show up, right? Because I was like buying like enough for others. So like, and he would come up every day at this specific time and he just didn't show, right? And after all these years, after this like 7-year run, like I remember finally.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's when you first got dope sick?
Yeah. Yeah.
I was getting dope sick immediately. I remember like as soon as I was on opiates, I was dope sick more than I was high because I couldn't ration my, like let's say I came up on 40 pills. In 3 days, they'd be gone. And then I wouldn't be able to get money for like 3 or 4 days. I'd be like just thinking of ways, or I'd be able to get like a quarter of one or like get fronted a sub or something, a Subutex at the time.
Yeah.
But I was dope sick all the time, bro. It's like, sometimes I think back, I was like, what was I thinking? Because I hear so many stories like yours where people just used endlessly for years.
So yeah, and like eventually, as I'm like flirting, like, thinking I'm like this like heroin tycoon, with like 10 bags in my pocket, that don't even really belong to me. And I'm continuously taking the tri-rail back and forth. And then like on March 17th, St. Patrick's Day of 2010, I went to that doctor again. He had moved. Now he's like east of 95 on Atlantic. And he was like under fire, so like the cops like saw me there, and it's St. Patrick's Day. So I'm drinking in the car and going to the doctor and getting my scripts filled. And so when we left there, they pulled us over and I had a bottle with somebody else's name on it. And so they charged me with the pills because not all the pills matched. The pills had to match the bottle, right? Like, cause they were like
counted. Yeah.
The count and all that. Cause they broke the guy off and they ripped me out through the window. And so that was it. And that was like, I was arrested in Broward, lived in Dade. So now I'm like in jail in a different county. I'm no stranger to that, And so what ended up happening was I was arrested in Dade shortly before that. So now I was on pretrial in Broward. I was on house arrest in Dade. So I had something on my hip and something on my ankle, right? And so like the microwave goes off, I have a fucking heart attack. and still trying to find more. And like my mom, like she just couldn't deal with it anymore. And I had this house arrest thing and she knew that I was facing serious consequences. And so she's like, here, stay in this studio apartment, like on 73rd and Biscayne, like stay there. And I did. And I just would have people come buy their heroin and it turned into like this shooting gallery, on house arrest. And like I went to my probation officer one day. He's like, I need you to come in. And I had just taken a drug test and I knew I failed, I went to the probation office. And like, if you're going to jail, you have time to prepare. Like you use like every last bit of what you got and you put on like 3 t-shirts and like 3 pairs of socks. So you have stuff while you're in jail. You have to buy it, right?
You didn't suitcase anything?
No. It was, I didn't have enough to, yeah, it wasn't.
Because that's normally the second step.
Yeah, usually. But the thing is,
I know people that are like, oh, I know I'm going to jail for 30 days. And they're like, I was like, how'd you fit all that up? They're like, oh, bro, I bought a half ounce of weed. I brought somas. I bought subs. I was like,
yeah, they have like a Louis key ball. Yeah, I get it. But yeah, and so I get to the probation office and he like says to me, he looks at me, he's like, bro, like you're a hot mess. Cause I was nodding off. it's like November in Florida, but it's like balls hot, and I'm wearing like 3 t-shirts, 3 pairs of socks. And it's like November of like 2010. And he says, he slides me a Post-it note, and he says, call them people. He goes, I'll see you next month. And like, I'm thinking I'm going to jail.
Mm-hmm.
And what it actually was like, I look at that and I look at the note. It's got my dad's name on it. You know, I haven't heard from or seen my father since I was like 3 years old. I was like really like tripped out from like, what the fuck is, like, what is this? It turns out the sister that I didn't know exist, her favorite show was Police Women of Broward County. And the officer who ripped me out the window of that car in front of that pill mill was her favorite officer. And she tracks the arrests of that officer and sees
your name
of her brother. She lives in, they lived up in Redding, California. So like 3,000 miles away, like a sister I didn't know I had, like tracked me down. And so I got out and like, no, didn't go to jail, right? For this time. Put the Post-it note on this table and stared at it and used for another 2 weeks. You know, on Christmas, I called them and I spoke to them for the first time, you know, in 30 years. And I found out that like, you know, I have like family. You know, it's really interesting. You know, I asked them to help me with like money for a lawyer because, of course, you know, I'm not doing anything for free. You know, even like touching family reunions in active addiction, you know, you got to pay to play, and they did, and it was really loving, really nice, man. And then the probation officer was like, "Yeah, that's enough. You got that. Now you got to go." And Dade was like, "Whatever." You know, Dade County's like, you know, we're time served, but Broward wasn't having it. And they're like, yeah, you know, you arrested out in front of a pill mill and it was the hot button issue. They're like, yeah, we're going to court order you to this place. And they court ordered me to this like court ordered halfway house. It was First Step Sober House. And this was like my first experience with recovery. Right. And like, I was just happy to not be in jail. And like, I made it like 90 days, you know, my first time. And like, I always got high and like, went to strip clubs and got, you know, did all that stuff. So like, I just like was really worried about not being able to like live this lifestyle, you know? So like after 90 days, I had like this like overnight, you know, you can stay out overnight now after, cause you know, if you're doing all the things you're supposed
at the halfway.
Yeah, 100%. The first time it was on the weekend, I didn't even go on the overnight. I just went for like lunchtime on a weekend with my roommate. And we went to this strip club. And we drank Pepsi. And I left there. And this was like so profound for me. I'm like, I didn't drink. I probably spent a total of $9. I said, and hung out at a strip club all day. This is amazing, right? Like, why haven't I been doing this all along, right? And my buddy was there. He was drinking Pepsi too. I was like, where have you been? You know, I need people like you in my life, right? I'm like, let's run it back next weekend. Right. And like, and so we go the next weekend and this time he like brought like girls with him and stuff. And like, they keep like dropping like these subs, right? Like subliminals, like about drinking and stuff. And like, eventually it got to me, you know? And like, I looked over at him and I was like, I'm thinking about like ordering some beers. He's like, I don't know how to tell you this. He goes, but I've been drinking this whole time. I've been putting it in my Pepsi, bring it in with me. I was drunk last week. I'm drunk.
Wow.
You know, and I was just like, well, fuck, you know, like this is all a travesty and, you know, it's a big lie. Right. And so I call the waitress over. She comes over. I'm like, I need 2 Coronas, please. And she goes to go, because of course, please, because I'm a gentleman. And like, no lime. And so she goes to get them. Before she could even bring them back, I snatched them both off the trays and slammed them right back to back because I didn't want like this will to go, you know? And she's like pissed off because the other half of the tray almost went flying. And then I reach in my pocket. She's like, you got to pay, obviously. So I reach in my pocket and like my white chip comes flying out of my wallet, hits the carpet, and shatters.
Wow.
Like, it's like, and I look at my friend and we both start dying laughing. at this moment, and this was like the longest I'd ever been clean. Like we're talking about like at this point, like 15 years of active addiction, no breaks, even when I'm in jail, there isn't a break, I'll find a way, And so this 90-day mark, right? So like I hear people say things like, oh, I only got 60 days, I only got, 90 days. Like shit, everything after 90 days for me was like uncharted territory, And so, and like I managed to like keep up
I've
appearances.
always been excited about my clean time. I was excited about my clean time when I had 10 days. I was excited about my clean time when I had 25 days. Like I've always like every day was just like you said, uncharted territory. It was like something I had never done. Even the concept of counting the days wasn't even a thing before I got clean. And it was just such a amazing feeling to accumulate something for the first time in my life because I had never accumulated anything.
Oh, 100%, and it's the only way that like you can actually like measure, there's only unit of measurement.
It's the only in recovery.
Yeah. It's the only unit of measurement we got, because clean time doesn't mean everything. You'll hear people say things like that, but at the same time, like, yeah, but I got this much, like, sure.
I mean, I always say that, like, people say, like, oh, clean time doesn't matter or whatever. But, like, bro, we have clean time requirements to speak. We have clean time requirements. There's some service commitments where you got to have 5 years clean. There's some service clean time requirements for service commitments where you got to have 10 years clean, you know? So it's like, we can't measure how good you're doing in your recovery because you can fuck up at any day. It's a
100%.
day-to-day thing, but the clean time is the only thing we can measure. And hopefully by your judge of character, we could tell what type of steps you're working.
No, 100%, and so like, I remember like at this point, like I had, because of like that whole thing on like all those arrests and all of those monitors and all that stuff and the plea deal I had taken, I had like this like, suspended sentence, prison sentence, like over my head. The judge told me, Judge Lynch, like this guy gave me so many chances. Like if I need to meet him.
Is it Broward County?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure the last person on the show was talking about Judge Lynch.
Really?
Too. Yeah, it's so funny.
Yeah, he showed me some grace, right? Like I gave him no reason. But he said, if you come back in front of me, you'll be going to jail for a very substantial amount of time. And Florida State Prison, to be exact. I knew all of that. And so I was in this court-ordered situation. But like you were saying, like consequences don't really mean anything to an addict, right? So I knew that, but now I just had to innovate and create and find new ways to use or to get around getting caught. Because there's no way. Like people are like, yeah, get honest, tell the truth, for yourself. Secrets will keep you sick and like all this shit. Like, bitch, you ain't going to prison. I am. So I remember like I had this like first like home group situation I like used, but I kept coming because I didn't know. I didn't know what else to do, right? And I knew that if I stopped going, people would know, right? So I would continue to go. And I continued to show up to this meeting. And then like I would continue to like work steps with this sponsor.
Quotations.
Yeah. Like I was reading, bro. Like that's all I was doing. I was like reading this literature that he'd give me. And like, it was like homework, and like I would show up to do it. Like, and then there would be like these service commitments on the weekend because like this home group was like about service. Like that's what like that was like their big thing that they would talk about. And so I'd show up to these service things after like being out the whole night, like reeking about like alcohol seeping out of my pores, and like being of service. There came a point where like, they're like, oh, 6 months is coming up, right? And I'm like, oh, is it? Like usually when you pick up like recovery chips, tokens, or whatever you want to call them, there's like this 3 month gap usually. Right?
After 90 days, yeah.
Yeah. So when that 6 month came around, they were more excited about it than I was about my lie. And like, so I went and I picked this up, and I stepped in front of these people and got these, these applause and these hugs and all this stuff. And that for all intents and purposes, I didn't, earn. Right. And it just didn't sit right with me. And then by the time like the 9 month portion came around, right? And I was supposed to get this like 9-month chip token, whatever you want to call it. At the 9-month port, I remember them looking at me and they're like, well, listen, we've been talking and we want to make you, GSR of this home group. To me, this is like, like these guys want me to be governor, right? And so I'm like, this is all too much, and I never went back, dude. And when I stopped going back, it just eventually led to a place where I had just done enough to get this reputation to where people don't think that I would be the one to use. So I was able to slip through the cracks and eventually got that probation terminated and went on the most vicious 4-year run probably in my life.
Wow.
Yeah. And like had this like super toxic relationship with this girl. She's like my best friend and my worst enemy at the same time. She'd be the first person that I'd stab somebody for, but she'd be the first person I'd fuck over and vice versa. And and it got ugly and I hit lows that I never thought I hit. And then eventually like we had this like argument one day and she's like yelling and I'm yelling back because she had like been out all night and stole all my stuff when I was passed out. And the cops came and they're like, well, you know the rules. One of you's got to go. I was the only one who had a job at the time. I don't know why. I'm like, I'll go. I'm no stranger to jail, And I went.
Chivalry's not dead.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you know that. Right? And so I went and I got out and they said, you can go anywhere you want. Just don't go home. They said, we're going to release you. Just don't go home. So I went home and lived that life for like another 30 days. And then I came home one night and there was like no power, no running water. And this is in September in Florida, and for those of you that are not in Florida or not aware, it's really fucking hot here in September. And so as I came home, I knew that like I had to go fucking get high in order to deal with this shit. I came home, she was there like dripping, right? Like there's no power. It's like we live right off of Broward Boulevard. So I said, come on, and there's no public transportation. After 10 o'clock in Broward, I never understood why. Dade, you can get anywhere you want, like 24 hours a day. So Broward was just like archaic to me for like a using addict, Like, fuck you mean? Like, there's no $5 bus pass. Like, And so, so we started walking up Broward Boulevard. And like, we walked like 4 miles to go Cobb. And when we did, we were just about to like make this right turn to like right off of like, this like really off of like 31st, this Popeyes. It's an infamous, ominous Popeyes, right? And I'm about to like turn in there, or like, well, not turn, I'm walking, right? But there's 2 cops. They have this street blocked off, and I like have this vision in my head. As long as I keep looking forward, they won't be able to see me, and I turn invisible, right? Apparently, and so I just kept walking forward, and I got just out from in front of them, and I hear her like say hi. And like, I like looked over at her, like, when the fuck did you get so friendly? And they're like, well, now that you entered into this conversation willingly, we'd like to have your IDs. I never had an ID, but at this time I just knew I just wanted to get honest. And I told them, who I was. And I gave them my first and last name, my social, gave them all of the stuff that they wanted. And in doing that, they said, we're going to go to the car. And if everything checks out, you're free to go. Great, but from past experience, never in my life have they gone to the car, everything check out, and me be free to go, And so they go to the car, they come back, and they're like, Mr. Castro, you've been very courteous and very cooperative. We want to thank you for that. What you failed to make us aware of is that you were in a domestic situation with her, and point directly to her, about 30 days ago. And this is the one person you're not supposed to be around. So you're going to have to come with us, right? And I'm looking at them and I'm like, my birthday's in 5 days. Like telling them like my birthday's in 5 days. I got no
You're
running.
that guy.
Yeah, I got no running water, no power. But like, I'm really worried about this birthday, right? And so they took me in, for the violation of an injunction. I didn't know then. I know now. It's like that's my clean date. That's
Cool.
the day that changed my life. I've been clean ever since. I couldn't get out, because it gave me like this period of time in between where usually I just go into jail and then get out almost right away, and then like think I'm being like welcomed home like Bobby Shmurda or some shit, and like it's like no, it's just not like that. Like
Welcome home, Bobby. By
yeah,
the way.
yeah, welcome home, Bobby. Eventually, I called my mom. I hadn't spoken to her in years, and she called like my public defender and all this other stuff, and they got me a court date because I couldn't get out. So once I got in front of the judge, and the judge is like, "Listen, you can go wherever you want. We're moving you from here. We're going to put you on drug testing, regularly scheduled drug testing once a week. Tri-county pass. Go wherever you want. You just can't go home." So they released me at 4:30 in the morning with nothing but a pink piece of paper in my hand.
Why do they do that?
I don't know.
It's crazy, right?
It's asinine.
Like, what's the fucking benefit of releasing someone at 4:30 in the morning?
I don't know, but I wasn't complaining. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, you weren't waiting till 9.
yeah. You know what? This is not
I
going
know,
to work
but
for
like,
me.
I always wonder why they release people out at those times.
It's really weird, and nothing really makes sense in there. And I think that's part of like the psychological part of it. You know what I mean? And so like your wallet is like in Fort Lauderdale, you're in Pompano. It's like a game show. You gotta, like it's like some kind of like Survivor shit.
It's like a rat maze.
Yeah, you got to figure out like who's gonna get home. So like everyone like flashes this paper on the bus, and like I got on the bus and I went home. And I remember going there, and it's like remember feeling like right as I got up on Broward Boulevard on that bus, it's like you're not gonna like what you see. And I went in there, and she was in there. She was in bed with some dude I'd never seen before. It was like in my house and all this other stuff, and I was just like that's what I needed to see, right? Like to know like that part was closed. So I'm packing up 2 garbage bags of clothes, and just as I'm about to leave, like she's like, "Wait, I need help. I'm sick. Can you help me one last time?" And like you said, chivalry ain't dead. So I walked back up Broward Boulevard with her again, and this time I got to where I was supposed to go, and I seen dude, and like. If you're from Florida, like you get to see some really innovative shit. Like people have like transformers for cars, like their doors come apart and they have secret compartments. And like, so I knew this guy has this like really creative door. So I'm like tapping on his door, like, just give me the shit. I'd been in jail for a minute, and he's like, you look great. And I'm like, thanks. It means a lot coming from the dope man,
The dope too.
Yeah. Thanks. Really, yeah. I'm really proud of that. And he's like, yeah. He goes, but I don't have anything. It turns out he did have it. He just didn't want to give it to me. And at that point, I was done walking Broward Boulevard. And I hopped on a bus, and I went to a recovery house. Literally walk in, like, hey, I need help. And
no money for first week rent. They just took you in.
No, I let him know, like, I'm not gonna front. Like, I called my mom. I'm like, hey, listen, like, I ain't gonna make it like I got it off the muscle. You know what I mean? Like, no, I called my mom, and like she put up the money for me.
Nice.
And and that's the last money I ever took from my mom too. Now that I think of it, it's pretty deep piece if I think about it. And it's the last time, I didn't say nothing, because I always told her, whenever I tried to get clean or whatever.
This is going to be it.
Oh, yeah, this is it. No, they love me here. Oh, you kidding me? I'm probably going to be a director there in like 90 days, like I'm doing better in this program than anyone ever has, and like I'd gas up how wonderful I was doing. But this time I just didn't say anything, I just concentrated on what was important. And then at 6 months, right? Like, you hear in recovery a lot like attraction rather than promotion, she asked me, she's like, what the fuck's going on? And I got to share with her, about, that I was a member of a 12-step fellowship that saves and changes lives. And that I participated in something called sponsorship, and that I was visiting a regularly scheduled home group and got to know people. And they had things like conventions, and for some reason, I go fucking bowling now. And I got to share that with her. And I just remember being truly happy,
For me, it was, we'd hang out in the parking lot till like 2 a.m. and go to Denny's. And I swear to God, there was times where I had like a couple months clean, and you couldn't tell me on the way home that I didn't have the best time my whole life. Just hanging out in the parking lot, listening to music, some kid freestyling or something, some girls laughing, and fucking around, and then we go to Denny's, and no one would really have money except for like one person. He'd like pay for a couple of us, and we just get kicked out of Denny's for being too loud or whatever, and then get home at 3 in the morning, and life made sense for a little bit, you know?
Oh, 100%. I mean, like I was telling you, like in the beginning, like when I got clean, like everybody was like 22 and I was like 35. So like I had this like huge gap. So I'm just looking for things to disqualify myself, right? Like you're too young, I'm too old, like different things to make sure that the recovery process wouldn't fit for me. I became friends with like this kid who had like this long like porn star mustache and like the tightest jeans you ever seen in your life. And like he would take me to like meetings and stuff. That was like my first exposure to like NA. I'd been to NA once before. It's like that time I was lying about my clean time. Like they talked me into going to this convention. Like they do these like clean time countdowns. And like I'm like standing up for this like fake time, bawling my eyes out, like and not knowing why. That was like my first experience, and like you couldn't help me. Like I was having like the time of my life. You know what I mean?
I still feel that way. Even after 12 years clean, like the clean time countdown at a convention, going to the spiritual retreat in the Keys, just being around like family. Like there's a feeling of belonging that I get from 12-step meetings that I haven't gotten anywhere in my whole life. Even at like my family Thanksgiving dinners, even like in Christmas, like even like in school, like even my friends that aren't addicts, like as much as I love being like with them and whatever, there's nothing that compares to like what I feel. Even if I don't know people in recovery, just knowing that you guys are addicts, I just feel at home.
No, 100%. It's like, it's a common thread. It's like an unspoken bond, And when you get somewhere and like, just like, let's face facts. Like people don't just go to 12-step meetings because they don't really have shit else to do. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm sure it does happen here and there, but like, welcome to those people too. Like if you're there, chances are like you've done some of the things that I've done. Chances are you've taken walks up Broward Boulevard or roads much like it. Chances are, you've had to make those desperate phone calls. And chances are, you didn't feel a part of either. And for a group of people who never really felt a part of, we really have a ton of unity, in each other. So yeah, it's pretty deep if you think about it.
Absolutely. So what has the past couple of years been like for you?
It's been really pretty amazing, like, I'm not going to sit here and glorify things for you, like I've had like failed relationships, I have a clean time mugshot, right? Maybe we'll save that for another episode. But like, I had like a bunch of things that have happened to me, throughout the process of recovery that I thought like for sure, like my first year clean, I thought for sure, like most people would have gotten high, like I went back to the house that I used in, with the girl that I used with a couple times and to see her and like went out on like dates with people that are like quote unquote like normal, and like I hate when people say that. They're like, or they try to make it cute and say normies, like no, dude, like I'm pretty fucking normal, like I don't know, like these people would be like, this one chick was like pulling like airplane bottles out of her purse constantly throughout the whole date, and I'm like, yeah, this is not fucking normal. Like I know a place you should go, you know what I mean? Like I ended up like turning into like this recovery advocate as opposed to like having a date, you know what I mean? So like my first year was a very interesting experience. As time went on, I just started to take what I learned within the fellowship that I attend and start to apply it to like my professional life, my relationships with my family, and things of that sort. Obviously, things were a little curtailed with the pandemic, and everybody was doing their 12-step meetings on like Zoom or Blue Jeans. I don't even know what the fuck Blue Jeans is. I just know that they do.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah, it's another one of those things. And like, I was really excited about that, in the beginning. I'm like, you mean to tell me I could hear any speaker anywhere in the world 24, like, like it's like a video speaker tape type situation. And like, I was really excited for it, bro. That shit lasted like 3 weeks. After that, I was like, yo, this fucking sucks, bro. Like, and like the way that we would communicate it was like through social media pages. And like in the comments section, I'm just watching like the very worst image of us like unfold, like everybody being petty. Like it turned into like tensions are already high because everyone's afraid of like impending death coming from a pandemic and like, the possibility of it. And then now like they're just tearing each other apart, arguing about the stupidest things. And like I found myself in a place where I was like, yeah, you know what? This is a great time to just check out. Like I could fade away and do like I did.
A lot of people have.
And trust me, I know. So I understand. I understand where they come from. And I don't necessarily mean, go back to using. I just mean, stop showing up, stop participating in sponsorship, stop going to, like, if I start thinking like, oh, like these events are lame, that I go to, like these recovery events, at that point, like I already know my spirit's in the wrong place. And so like, I got to a place where that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to kind of like break off, and I caught myself, and I did what I thought. I called up my sponsor and I talked to him, and I'm like, yeah, this is ugly, and I had, some step work I had worked on that was sat in my bag for 18 months.
Wow.
But it was done. Just never
went over it.
Yeah. And so I like tightened it up a little bit. And I'm like, he lives up in Philadelphia, and I went up there and I'm like, we need to cover this. And like, it helped me to get in touch with a few things. And the cool part about it was that like, even though like I had written it, what in the grand scheme of things seems like a while ago, like the information's still so relevant, and if anything, it's more relevant because of how much it ties into what's happening to me right now, right? The common threads of the things that I do, my patterns, the way that I react to situations, or just taking situations and replacing the people, Yeah,
it's the same thing.
Yeah, it's the same, So time doesn't matter.
I remember doing like an inventory of my sponsor, and he was like, you see these girls? It's the same girl. And it's interesting because if you don't change the thought behind the behavior, you just end up in the same scenario with like different paint on the walls. Same girl, different name, or whatever. Same business partner situation, just different name,
100%. And like one of the things that I've discovered is like it's avoidance, right? Like leaving things undone and procrastination. In getting in touch with, my family, like I told you about, right? Like a lot of questions were answered about my past.
Yeah, are you cool with your family now?
With my mom?
With your mom, your other family you found out you had?
Me and my mom are extremely tight. We talk every day.
Cool.
It's become the relationship that I've always wanted, sometimes against my will. Like I came to like the rooms of recovery to forge a relationship with her. And then sometimes it's the last phone call that I want to answer. Like it's kind of a paradox in that way because it's like, ugh, again, like one of those things that like, it's just too much now, I got what I wanted, enough's enough, And on the other side, like I've handled it with kid gloves, because it's weird, it's like finding out about all this family. But what ended up happening was after covering all of that, my grandmother was so important to me. I found out my father's dad was alive, nearly 100, and he lived in like Puerto Rico. And so I just didn't want everything to constantly go undone. So after coming back from Philly, like shortly thereafter, I planned a trip to Puerto Rico to go at least be in his presence because he was not doing well. At least be able to say
that you met him.
Yeah, I showed up, right? And so I did, and like I got there, I was like, oh, listen, let's go zip lining. Let's do this. Let's do that. Like I wanted to do everything but that. My girlfriend was like, you came here to see your grandfather. And that's what you're going to do. Right?
That's cool.
Yeah. Shout out Sarah. Right. And so I did that. So I called my uncle and I asked him, I'm like, hey, so can I have the address? He's like, what do you mean address? There's no address. He goes, what you do is you take the name of this town and you put it in your maps. And then once you get to that town, you start asking people where he lives. Yeah. So I was like, all right. Now,
really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy.
So I put the name of the town in, right? And I started like going up in these mountains and just like asking people, like, do you know Macho Pietro? That's my grandfather's name, right? And dude, don't you know that like 6 out of 8 people I asked
Know him?
knew him.
Oh my God.
Yeah, but none of them spoke like English, you know? But they
You
were,
don't speak any Spanish, huh? Because your dad's Puerto Rican.
no,
Yeah.
only thing I know how to do in Spanish is cop. Well, I can order some food too.
Yeah, I was gonna say tacos and
No,
cocaine.
Yeah, like a little more than that. I'm very insecure about my Spanish, right? So, and this is like something that's very important. So I finally found this guy. They went in and grabbed this one dude. He came out, and he's like the guy who speaks English, right? And he's like, "So what's going on?" And I'm like, "Well," I told him like what I'm here to do. He's like, "Oh shit." He's like, "Hold on." He goes in the house, gets a composition book, and draws out this like crude map.
Wow.
And says, so he like, and like, I'm like on this like rural mountain, like bumpy roads. Like I crashed the rental at one point, like bumped it into something, and I crashed. And the whole map starts off with left at the mango tree, right? and so, but dude, like I followed that map and I got up to like this clearing and there was like 2 or 3 houses up there. And there were some people sitting outside and I'm like, I asked them, you know, do you know Macho Pietro? And they're like, right here. And they point to the other house. And I'm like, fuck, dude. You know, like I made it. It's like in the middle of the afternoon and like, it was like, it's beautiful up there, you know? And so they bring this kid out, you know, he's like this like 12, 14-year-old kid. And they're like, here, come, because he speaks English, right? And so the kid's like, come with me, all right? So I'm like walking down this hallway, right? It's like this long-ass hallway in this house. I go around the corner and there's this man, you know, almost 100 years old, like laying in this like hospital bed that was like makeshift that they put in there for him. And it was my grandfather, you know? And like I sat there and like took that in for a minute, right? And as I'm taking that in, all of a sudden like that gets cut off. Like the whole moment gets cut off because this kid starts flicking the lights. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, oh, I'm trying to wake him up for you so that you can talk with him. And I'm like, no, dude, like, it's okay. You know, I just wanted to be here, right? And he goes, yeah, I don't come here that much. He goes, because it makes me depressed. And I'm like, are you related to him? He's like, yeah, that's my great-grandfather. And so I'm like, really? I go, how many other people? He's like, that house. So it turns out like I have this like whole like expansive family, and I wasn't there very long. You know, it was like a 20-minute, half-hour thing, and then I just realized that like as I was leaving there, like 2 things. Like, you know, number one, this kid didn't know I was this guy's grandson when he brought me in, so you just let anybody in this fucking house, like you psycho, right? And number 2, like, you know, what I thought was like this extremely painful situation. It was probably one of the most beautiful experiences of my life. And in leaving, like just a week and a half ago, my grandfather died.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that.
No, I mean, it is a very sad thing, but I showed up, you know, I did what everybody told me to do, you know, and I was able to experience that, you know, and I can say, you know, and share this with you, you know, that I had that opportunity because I wanted to do something different. You know, I thought it was time to check out. And if I had checked out, I wouldn't have had this experience. You know, I wouldn't have been able to do this and to really like connect some serious dots to begin to feel whole again. You know what I mean?
And that's the whole point about recovery, is that it's not about abstinence. You know, this is about, you know, living a life that aligns with what you truly want. You know, like when you do, you know, your 3rd step, it talks about God's will and self-will and whatever. And it says eventually your self-will aligns with God's will. And, you know, when people are reluctant to do the steps, it's like, bro, this isn't making you do something different. This is actually going to push you to what you really want in the first place, and not go about it in some unhealthy way, because, you know, we go after the things we want usually in an unhealthy, obsessive, empty type of way, you know. And I believe that, you know, when you work the 12 steps, when you have a sponsor, when you're guided through people that know you're on this spiritual journey, whatever, you get what you want anyways, you know. And a lot of times people have this reluctance to work the steps because they're like, that's not what I want to do.
Yeah. I mean, like, don't get it twisted. Like, with abstinence, your life will get exceedingly better.
1,000%.
Like right off top. Like,
just from getting
like
clean.
just remove the drugs, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden the lights are no longer off. The water's running.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you might even like be moving into a better house, and now your clothes smell better
Mm-hmm.
and things, you look better. People are giving you compliments. You're showing up to work on time. All of these things just happen immediately. And I would find myself in a place where I really think, okay, this is what recovery is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting better, you know? And the problem is that I wasn't able to enjoy that. And so abstinence will give me all of the things that I could possibly want, and recovery just teaches me how to keep them.
That's awesome. I know this guy, Ray, who always says, you know, people don't want to go to meetings no more because they got a girlfriend in a car. Shit, I could do that on heroin. You know? It's like I had a car and a girl on heroin, you know? And yeah, I truly believe that. I truly believe that like the 12 steps makes me enjoy the things that I get through being clean. Because, you know, we've met tons of people that have gotten everything they've ever wanted, stop going to meetings, and then they don't enjoy the things that they got anyways.
Yeah. And it's amazing. Like a lot of those people, like one of the most powerful things I've known is that like throughout my process of recovery is that those people come back, you know, and they call me and they tell me because they knew I'd be here,
Yeah.
you know, and just to know that you're a fixture and to know that you're a welcoming fixture, right?
And some motherfucker was here for me. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? There's also like this duty that I have that it's like, even if like, you know, God came down today and was like, yo, Bryan, you don't got to do any steps. You're good. I'd be like, but dude, what about everyone else? You know, it's like the only selfless thing that we got going on. You know, mind you, yeah, you could do shit for work and you could volunteer. Like there's nothing really that compares or substitutes being a member of the program that saved your life because there was somebody who fucking was a member to get your ass in the door.
No, 100%. You know, remember I told you about that home group that they wanted to make me GSR? I went on that vicious 4-year run, and all I could think of throughout that whole 4-year run was like, you know what? Like, I know where to go. You know, like I could go back and see those people, and I would have to like swallow my pride and go back in there and let them know that I let them down, right? And so, and 4 years, I just lived in this like immense shame, but I can't go back. I can't let them know, right? And after I had like a year clean, a friend of mine needed a ride home. He said, hey, I need a ride because I just got my car, right? I got like a year, you know, so like shit's going pretty good, right? Like I didn't have a driver's license for 13 years.
Wow.
Yeah, so like my driver's license was suspended in 2003. And I literally had to like do the DUI classes for a DUI in 2003. In 2016 with like 18 months clean.
Wow.
And they're asking me, they go, what happens when you drink? I'm like, I don't fucking know. like, bro, like this doesn't apply to me like right now, you know? Like I get it, it did, you know? And like, so it was really confusing, but I had to do it to get the license. And so like this kid knew that I went through all that. He's like, let me get a ride, you know? And he's like, I want to go to my home group. He gets in the car. As I'm looking where we're going, I'm like, holy shit. You know, this is that home group,
Cool.
you know, I'm like, you know what, you know, I got some self-acceptance. I got that driver's license, you know, I got like a year plus clean. I'm like, so I walk up in there and I see the guys that I knew and they were still there. Right. And I'd been avoiding this meeting and all of that because I didn't want to like have to face them. But now I got this time. So I walk in, I'm like, it's me, you know, I'm clean and I'm back. And they looked at me and they're like, who the fuck are you?
Yeah.
You know, so like I'd used for like this like 4-year portion of time in fear of going back to this group or this meeting and to let these people know that like I let them down. Like I was in this constant fear of that. In reality, they didn't even know who the fuck I was.
Yeah, I have a friend who stopped going to meetings, and I was like, bro, like, come to this meeting with me. And he'll only go to like small meetings. He didn't want to go to this big meeting. He's like, nah, bro, people talk shit about me there, and like people are gonna say stuff about the girl that I'm dating. I was like, bro, no one even fucking knows you, bro. It's been like 6 years. It's like a whole new crowd of people, bro. No one even, you fucking walk in there, be a fucking ghost, bro. No one knows who like we think we're so important in our head, you know. But I just want to say thank you for coming out, bro. It's always a pleasure to see you.
Always a pleasure. Thank you, man.
Absolutely, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
This show is not affiliated with any specific 12-step program.
If you or a loved one is struggling with an addiction, please find a local 12-step meeting. If you believe you may need detox or drug treatment of any kind, please call 888-699-9395 to speak to a specialist. The show is sponsored by United Recovery Project, a state-of-the-art drug and alcohol rehab facility. You can visit our website at unitedrecoveryproject.com.